of a book on gender, and we've all heard a lot about gender recently. On the Ellen's program, on the cover of People magazine with the most famous transsexual, formerly Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner. We have with us Professor Phil Devine and his lovely wife, Celia Wolfe Devine, who have written a book called Sex and Gender, a Spectrum of Views. And indeed, there is a wide spectrum of views on the subjects of sex and gender in this book. And we gave some introductions last week, but I suppose we should introduce ourselves again. Celia, would you introduce Phil to us?
Phil teaches at Providence College, went to Yale and University of California, Berkeley, was a liberal arts fellow at Harvard Law, I guess it was, wasn't it? Has written The Ethics of Homicide, he's written Relativism, Nihilism, and God. He's written a book on natural law. He's written quite a number of books and many, many articles and, papers. And anything else you want to add?
No. Celia is a retired professor from Stonehill College in Massachusetts. She's the author of Diversity and Community in the Academy, on Affirmative Action, and Descartes on Seeing.
And some work on prayer lately.
And recently some books on prayer. Oh. So she is a very diverse and versatile writer, religious issues, social, political issues, and early modern.
We were talking about a lot of things. We had one of the most fun half hours that I can recall in recent memory. And we were talking about a lot of things. We decided that we should define terms which are in discussion. Define sex and define gender. Shall we take an attempt to define sex and gender?
I would like to take that, yes. First of all, sex is the organs, also hormones and chromosomes. Sex is biological. Animals have sex. Gender is the psychological and social meanings which vary, although not as much as people sometimes say, from culture to culture and individual to individual, that people put on sexual differences. There are two sexes. There are few difficult cases, but that's life. There are always difficult cases for any classification. There is not any particular number of genders. The question, how many genders are there, 6 or 12 or 20 or whatever, is a mistaken question. Gender is the phenomenon of socially and psychologically responding to and dealing with the basic facts of anatomy and physiology, which we share with dogs, cats, and so on. So those are the terms.
I hear that there's a case, I thought it was at Harvard, where they asked a student to define her gender, I think, and she said, I'm both, and she wants to be called they, or something like that.
Oh, that's entirely possible. Students at Harvard can be confused intellectually as well as anyone else. Mm-hmm. She's not both, or he's not both. He or she may be a interesting psychological profile, although it'd be something more than bisexuality, since bisexuals usually define themselves as one sex or the other, as do homosexuals. But I don't know what this woman or this person, assuming it was a woman, but what person was like. But she was only one person. She wasn't they, I'm pretty sure.
Apparently the political society is attuned to this phenomenon.
Well, if you squawk loud enough, you can get practically anything. And it doesn't cost people very much to pretend that they think you're female when they jolly well know you're male. Or pretend that you're male when they jolly well know you're female. I saw an article once on man giving birth.
Oh, yes.
But of course, this person was not a man.
No.
Clearly she was a woman. She had giving birth meant that she had the full complement of female organs, and she did. She looked a lot like a man,
Yeah.
probably behaved a lot like a man, but she wasn't a man. I mean, some of these problems can be a little complicated, but any person who gives birth is a female.
Yes.
Any animal that gives birth is female.
Female.
One could imagine, we're not dealing with
And the
that.
one who fertilizes is male.
The one who fertilizes is a male. That is, again, sex is what we share with dogs and cats and sheep. One of the weird things about these discussions is the liberals over-spiritualize sex to an incredible degree. They don't want to face the fact that there is something in common between human and animal couplings. In real life they must know that. But I have a colleague who believes that sexual attraction is sort of like admiring somebody's cheekbones. Well, I suppose someone might find cheekbones attractive. It's entirely possible, but the only reason cheekbones are mentioned is that both men and women have cheekbones, and male and female cheekbones are not all that different. One thing that struck me very much in all of these debates is that the liberals want to define us all as persons rather than as men and women.
Yes.
And even there's an idea that we can evolve out of male-female differences,
Yes.
which I'm not a biologist, but as far as I can tell, is utter nonsense from a biological point of view.
Two of our current popular philosophers, if I should even call them philosophers, Gloria Steinem and Gloria Allred, have relatively recently said that they do not want any discussion of gender differences. They think that to quote Gloria Allred, we've come too far to go back to that.
You mean sex differences?
Sex differences.
Not wanting to talk about something doesn't mean it goes away.
Yeah.
Parents raising boys and girls, any man trying to live with a woman or any woman trying to live with a man, anyone who has to deal with a man or a woman being the other on a regular basis is going to discover these differences. To say we can make unemployment go away by not talking about it, or inflation go away. No economist would let you get away with that.
No.
Left, right, or center, we can't make things go away by not talking about them.
Trying to remember if I told you the last time I was on the funny story about my sister and her husband and
Yes.
the daycare center.
Yes.
My sister was very exposed to a lot of feminist ideas at UMass Boston, and when I say, I don't mean to say all feminist ideas are bad, by the way. It's just that the ways it's evolved are very troubling. But anyway, they had a dollhouse, and the woman at the daycare said, "No, our boys like to play with the dollhouse too." And my sister was sort of smiling, and then she said, "But they play differently. They put the dolls on top of the house and push them off." My brother-in-law was snickering.
Yes, he doesn't object openly, but he obviously has a very strong sense of his masculinity.
Yes.
And is delighted that his son has a very strong sense of his masculinity, and would be extremely upset if he didn't. He just doesn't challenge these ideas openly.
But there are people out there, and I've been told this, and I didn't really believe it, but someone that I thought I knew fairly well, I said something about some sort of possible problems with homosexuality not being just totally equal and just the same and coming naturally and just the same as heterosexuality. And she was horrified. Oh, how can you reconcile that with Jesus telling us to be non-judgmental and loving? And how can you? Shocked, absolutely shocked. And I lived in San Francisco for about 5 years, not far from, right up the street from Castro.
Oh, yes.
And I knew people. My feelings, my attitudes here are not just ivory tower. I saw people I worked with and even very close friend destroyed by that scene, the Castro scene.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the guys I worked with, and it, what can I say? It was troubling, and spiritually, emotionally, physically, it was damaging.
Confused identity is not fun.
No.
I mean, it's fashionable, but it's not fun. A good friend of mine had a lot of confusions about his identity, and he's now happily married to a woman and much happier.
He's happily married.
Now much happier.
Yeah.
He was always, he didn't go around moaning all the time. He was always cheery, but there are people who are always cheery, and you get to know them well. You realize
Yeah.
they're dealing with their pain, and he wanted to be accepted, and so he would be cheery, and he comes into the room, people light up because he was always cheery, but
Yeah.
it's a very common phenomenon. But anyway, he is suffering from some rather serious confusions about his identity, of which he was quite aware. I'm not telling things he wouldn't admit himself. I'm not going to name him anyway. But now he's married to a woman. He found the right woman for him, which was rather amazing, actually. He did not strike me as exactly the best item on the marriage market, but lo and behold, he's much happier.
A very strong woman.
A very strong woman who actually rather runs him, which as women frequently do. But no, so I mean, confused identity isn't
They
fun.
communicate. And
Yeah, but she's not hopelessly domineering, but she does. She
dotes upon it.
she dotes upon him, but also rather manages him, I think would be the word, the exact word. I mean, she's got skills, knows how to handle men and get them to do what she wants without bruising their egos.
That's what our mothers were supposed to teach us.
But I mean, it's not.
Didn't learn.
It's not. I mean, that was the remark from Jan Morris. I don't want to hear about gender again. It's wearying to have to not know who you are and have to constantly assert you're really a woman. I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand why people. Oh well, the fact that people find something fashionable proves nothing at all. One way or the other, I guess.
Jan Morris is somebody who was featured in your book.
Yes.
Which is a textbook used throughout the country. Sex and Gender, A Spectrum of Views. I was listening to Point of View Radio, Kirby Anderson, not long ago, and he was telling us that the Johns Hopkins University Hospital was the pioneer in gender reassignment surgery, but they have stopped, he said, because of the suicide rate following the gender reassignment surgery.
Yes. I've checked that out, and it seems to be true.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently transsexuality is associated with a very high suicide rate, and at least the surgery doesn't help. I've heard that. I checked out, and that seems to be true.
Yeah, and the male to female is, I know this is true. Their breasts and the bodily changes are a function of taking hormones.
Oh, yes.
Hormones. So when you get to be menopausal age, you're going to keep taking these massive doses of hormones, and you're sort of menopausal, non-man, non-woman. I mean, it's sort of at the time that they first experience this rush of estrogen and suddenly feel different and see the world differently and walk on air and all. But as you get older, to maintain that, you'd have to keep taking, I believe, all these hormones. And what's that going to do to your body? Even worrisome.
We have Bruce Jenner, kind of like the modern celebrity figurehead for transsexuality on the cover of People magazine. And he was on the Ellen program where he came out against homosexual marriage.
That's interesting. He's prepared to marry but he would now be prepared to marry a man, I assume.
I don't know.
He's a woman.
Because he said he's unwilling to give up his male genitalia, at least for now.
Okay. Well,
he hasn't done the whole thing.
What his views are, I'd better not try to. I would not speculate. I'm trying to figure them out in my mind, but you haven't told me enough.
Yes.
But does he assert firmly that he is a woman, despite the fact he still has his equipment?
Yes.
Okay. Presumably, then he would be willing to marry a man and not consider that homosexual marriage. It seemed to follow. But logic is sometimes flies out the window at this point, so I'm not going to press it.
Well, one of the things we talked about in this book, Sex and Gender, has to do with something which came up in the news just the other day. It came up in a news service that I received. A family researcher said that the evidence is clear that opposite-sex parents have better parenting outcomes. There's a Dr. Paul Sullins who gave a presentation, and he said that, he said, quote, "I don't have any evidence that two persons of the same sex are any less loving or caring or extend themselves any less in lots of ways for their children than do parents of the opposite sex. However, if for whatever reason the greatest benefits for child well-being come only when they are the biological offspring of opposite-sex parents, and since same-sex relationships cannot achieve that, no matter how loving and committed they may be, no matter how great they may be in their parenting, two parents of the opposite sex can never replicate the bundle of benefits for child well-being that's possible for opposite-sex parents." And he goes on and talks about it. He has a study sample of 1.6 million people.
Well, I know Mark Regnerus reached similar conclusions. He's at the University of Texas, and
He got into trouble, didn't he?
there was one writer called an academic auteur de fait. As far as I can tell, not being a sociologist, I'm not a sociologist. No, sociology will never be a hard science, but this was a very careful and serious research, and it has the same conclusion. It was the best, I think say it was the best done so far. That the earlier ones have been done on very poorly selected samples, like my friends.
Yeah, like one thing, or people who volunteered.
Yeah.
One thing he did that I think was a very important, added to Regnerus's value here on this survey, was he spread the net very, very widely, but he tried to get people who were now adult and had grown up in these kinds of situations looking back. Like I was at the State House talking about same-sex marriage, and several lesbians brought in, this kid, maybe 12 or something, saying, "Oh, how great it was," but I didn't think that was quite fair to the child. But even so, how's his perspective going to last over a lifetime when you look back over it? And I think that's an important dimension that you need to take into account. And the other thing was, of course, how would they recruit their subjects for the studies? Well, they'd go to, gay or lesbian centers and.
Well, Sullins, who has a sample size because of his association with the National Health Interview Surveys from 1997 through 2014, a sample size of 1.6 million people. He says that 47 studies of children raised by same-sex couples saying that they're not worse off than children raised by opposite-sex parents, all done prior to 2010. The mean sample size of all the studies was only 39.
Yes.
Well, the American Psychological Association did a sort of flip-flop on that. And I guess through political pressure, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah, of course. But, I mean, in terms of the study, I didn't know this study, but I know that I was very, very favorably impressed by Regner's study. He seemed to have been done very carefully and well. And there's a methodological problem about these studies. It came up in one of my classes. I was discussing the question what children owe their parents, an ethics class, or an ethics part of an intro class. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I said, one of the problems. What if your parents get divorced for silly reasons? And that does happen. Well, a woman in the class got all defensive because her parents were divorced.
Yeah.
But of course, she doesn't want to hear bad things about her parents.
Yeah.
No one does.
Right.
But you have to somehow take that into account. Kids will be defensive about their parents, and I don't know how the sociologists who handle these studies manage that. But it did strike me very strongly that she felt that she came out all right after all. But then people can say that about other things that are very obviously abusive. So I don't know. It's a question I would pose to the sociologists to see how they can manage it. That's all.
Yeah.
But certainly children do learn to be men or women by modeling themselves on men and women.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but of course these people, some people don't want them to learn to be men or women in the traditional sense. I remember watching my little nephew before he was even old enough to speak, and his eyes would rest a little bit more on the males at the table, and he would imitate them.
Yeah.
You know, he knew he was one of them.
Yeah.
Yes, although growing up in the Cambridge area, he has a very strong sense of being male. Criticizing people's family arrangements has always been an extremely sensitive subject.
Yeah.
Daniel Moynihan, many years ago, was proposing a welfare program. This was in aid of a liberal welfare program. He wanted employment benefits so that black men could get jobs and maintain self-esteem. He was a true blue New Deal liberal in his program. Could not be more true blue. But he said on the way to arguing for this, hoping to get support for his employment programs, that female-headed families were not desirable. Gods. They all descended on him like wolves on the fold, and then, of course, the conservatives just walked in and killed the program because his supposed friends had undermined it. I don't know whether it would have passed anyway. In fact, I don't even know whether it would have been a good program, but it sounded like a good program to me. But people don't like to have their family arrangements criticized.
And yet there's such, it's in the news, and it becomes an important topic. One of the topics which came to mind as I was reading your book is the topic of fatherlessness. Right. And I did a little, internet study with the help of a reference librarian at Providence Public Library. Right. And we're told that 80% of this is a study from Chuck Colson's Prison Fellowship. 80% of the inmates in prison have fatherlessness in their background. Yeah. And that Mothers Only Family, a government study said that Mothers Only Family represent 23% from the and that's a Pew study actually, and that it's less than one half of Americans today. Less than one half of Americans today live in traditional families. 34. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Less than one half of us live in traditional families.
Some of them are widows or widowers. A lot of them are.
Really interesting.
Not that they're living alone. A lot of them.
Oh.
I mean, that would include widows,
but I don't think
widowers who are living alone.
Yes.
There are not that many widows or widowers with young children, though.
Yes.
I mean,
no. But I mean, they would be counted as not a traditional family,
yes.
and they may well have been married before.
Yeah.
And there's a great deal of single people.
Yeah.
Who never married.
Even the food manufacturers manufacturing what are called single sizes for purchase. And there's something called the National Fatherhood Initiative, which indicates that 24 million Americans have biological father absences. 24 million of us in America have biological father absent. Now that results, that seems to be associated, rather I should say, with deleterious sociological sequelae.
Well, it's hard to prove causation, of course, always in this area. But there seems to be at least certain common sense that, I mean, if I dare use that word in this context, but it seems certain common sense in saying that you need a mother and a father. I mean, that when I was growing up many, many years ago, that was just common sense. I mean, there were divorces. Everybody knew there were divorces and so on, but nobody thought these were good things. And usually think of the children. Maybe it's better to have them break up if they're fighting all the time, to the point that can be damaging to the children. The debate went along on those lines, but nobody thought it was good for a kid to be missing a parent. And even, of course, the war, I mean, everybody realized that you may have to go to war sometimes. You may not be able to avoid it, but it's bad for a father to be taken away from his family.
Yes.
And that happened was just one of those unfortunate facts that sometimes you get attacked. It was nothing that we would crow about.
Yeah, well, someone in our circle of acquaintance was a lesbian and worked with troubled children.
That's a marvelous story.
And it became very clear to her that children did best when they had fathers who were involved, and she decided to go straight. And she managed to.
She after some thrashing about, she found a man who was somewhat not the most aggressive type, shall we say, but gave her two really wonderful kids, and they were very happy. And then she got breast cancer, unfortunately, but that's another story. But no, they were glowingly happy. She loved having children. They seemed to be getting along. She and her husband were getting along beautifully and had these wonderful children. So it was a very happy ending, except for the breast cancer.
Well, we're coming to the end of another program, another runaway discussion on some topics which are social significance and currency. They're before us regularly. I can't say every day, but sometimes it seems as if it's every day. Topics which are before us in the media. I want to thank you both for being with us. It's been a pleasure to have you with us for these last 2 weeks.
Thank you.
And it's been a real pleasure to have you both with us today. Is there anything you'd like to add in the last minute of our program?
Well, I'd sort of like to make a plea for intellectual clarity. I mean, sex is one thing, gender is another. There are two sexes, there's as many genders as you want them to be, but really it's not countable. That's just conceptual, that's what we call in the trade conceptual analysis. It doesn't settle the big questions, but it does get rid of an awful lot of the fog.
People think it sounds more genteel. What gender is your baby instead of what sex is your
Or they
baby?
say, we are pregnant. Well, they are not both pregnant. However sympathetic, however model the man may be, however much he may help and sympathize, he is not pregnant. If he were, that would be a major disaster. Couldn't happen, of course.
Well, thank you for joining us for this program, and we hope to see you again next week.